we'll get right into it. You have a pretty interesting background. Now, you grew up in a small town in Texas with about 3,000 people, and you didn't connect with the internet until you were 17 years old?
Yes, that is correct.
But you learned about the outside world. You connected with the outside world through books and through your love for science fiction. Now, fast forward, when you were at the University of Texas, undergraduate, studying the sciences, and in grad school, you became fascinated with transportation. And how did you find that? By reading Elon Musk's white paper, envisioning a new form of transit. And so you began to envision this autonomous, sustainable, fast, new form. We have boats, planes, trains, automobiles, and now the Hyperloop. So tell us, what exactly is the Hyperloop?
So it is the proposed fifth mode of transport. So it's not this idea that's completely out of nowhere. So it builds on existing methods, like you mentioned, boats, planes, trains, and cars, and breakthroughs in that space to create an entirely new mode of transport that essentially you would be traveling at the speed of a plane and at the convenience of the train through a network of tubes above and below ground connecting major cities. So you would get from, say, LA to San Francisco in just 30 minutes.
Just 30 minutes. And so
right?
Yeah. Right? Just 30 minutes.
Yes.
I can't imagine that right now because just to get from one end of Manhattan to the next.
Yes.
Yes. About, what, an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Exactly.
But this is made possible through air levitation. And explain to me, what is air levitation and how's that different from magnetic levitation?
Okay, so air levitation is uncharted territory. And so my group has been pioneering in this space for a few years now. So we started at the University of Texas, and recently MIT adopted our research. So we have two research groups at both universities, like pushing this field forward. And so the concept of air levitation, it's not too different than hovercrafts, except it works like a concept of air hockey, where instead of air being pumped out of a table, allowing your puck to levitate and travel really rapidly with minimal energy, you imagine that in reverse, and instead imagine air being pumped out of the actual puck itself, or the pod in this case. You're hovering on a cushion of air. And so this differs from magnetic-based levitation because magnetic-based levitation uses really high-powered magnets. And this is like a great type of technology. It works really well. And currently, there are commercial systems that use maglev, but it's very energy intensive. And so we're trying to disrupt this space and see if we could do this in an entirely new way.
So we don't use magnetic levitation in the United States, correct?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right. So you do a lot of work on transportation, how it affects us, and what's your thought about that? How does transportation affect us?
And so I would ask, how does transportation not affect us? You just mentioned the pains in traveling to your destination every day. It takes me almost an hour to get from one part of Brooklyn to the other part of Brooklyn. And so transportation is access to education, to healthcare, to opportunity, resources. And so depending on whether you have a transportation infrastructure or what your relationship is to it, it completely can shift what your life is. I imagine what my life would be like growing up by the border if I had transportation systems, and what kind of opportunities that would have meant for me personally, because I didn't leave the country or the state until college, which is crazy. So I just think that, and it really does affect us. As you can see, I got a little worked up there.
I see. No, this is good. Keep going, keep going. So this is really fascinating, this development. As you say, it'll allow us to go from LA to San Francisco in 35 minutes, from New York to Boston in 35 minutes.
One thing I'll quickly add is that I think that we've already proven that it's possible. It's all about, it's about a collective purpose to get that done. So we've made a lot of breakthroughs in the research, but really what it comes down to is bureaucracy and having people care enough about this. But it's very challenging because we have people who don't have water today. So drinkable water. So when we're talking about transportation, it's so far ahead, but it really will affect our lives.
It will. And the ability to get those things, access, just as you say, access. So you'll get to these places really quickly. You envision this as being sustainable and low to no emissions.
Yes.
And you said it will save hundreds of hours off of our life over a year.
Yes.
But this is not really about speed for you. This is really about the mind, and it's about making connections. Why should I be concerned about making connections and being mindful on my commute to and from work?
So I think mindfulness is incredibly important, and we should be mindful when designing technology. And if you think about like the experience of like say moving in transportation today, I like to actually, I'll take a step back and say, whenever I think of new ideas lately, I think, okay, what are the possibilities? Not based on what exists, what are the constraints, but what are the possibilities? How would I want a transportation system to be designed? Well, I know I care about safety, I care about sustainability, high speed, I care about my time. So imagine if a transportation system worked seamlessly with all other transportation systems today. So you're not shuffling through apps, you just have one click to your destination. What if through our commutes we could save that time and use time through our commutes to actually get connected with our passions, what we care about doing, connecting with other people, connecting with the internet, things that you do not readily have available when using transportation systems today. And then it's important to also look at reality. So the reality is that every 24 seconds somebody will die in a car accident. And that is an absurd reality that we accept. But that reality we accept more than pioneering a new form of transportation. Because, you know, we are often not challenged enough to create our own values, to rewrite our own values. We just accept what we're born into. And I think it's important to rewrite what we believe, what we care about. And so I think that's something that we should do. So for one, instead of saying, that's how things have been for many years, we should instead say, what can we do different? How can we make things better?
You even talk about that in your TED Talk, about how you want people to be able to make choices and you want people to be able to really do something great. In my mind, I'm hearing you say, you can think about these things on your commute instead of just getting to the next destination.
Yes.
Okay.
So imagine if you had time through your commute to just to be mindful about the world around you. Road rage maybe wouldn't be such a thing. And you could think of like your experience moving through the world would be seamless. And the more mindful you are in your commute, if that flow was there, then you would flow into your work. You would flow into whatever it is following into your day, social interactions. And I think that's something that we lack. It can be a very chaotic experience. You could have meditated, done your yoga in the morning, then you hit the train and or the car, and then you're like, I lost it. I'm at work. I'm not my higher self right now. Where did that go?
It happens. So I want to switch gears just a little bit in how you built your teams. Now, back in 2016, while you were probably back in school, Bloomberg asked 1,251 managers at 547 companies what were the best qualities that they looked for in employees. And so the so-called sweet spot, where it's less common but more desired aspects, they were strategic thinking, leadership skills, and communication skills. When you built out Guadalupe and Airlev, what kind of skills were you looking for in people?
So, you know, at the time, you know, I was, like I mentioned, I was a college student, and so I wasn't. It was such a thing of passion. So we were just connecting with people, throwing ideas around before we thought we could even, you know, get to even this early phase of even building a prototype. So it was so much based on connectivity and passion, and really finding people like, oh, you want to like throw these crazy ideas around that are probably, you know, so beyond anything they'd ever done. And so I think that's really important. I think a sense of purpose is incredibly important. So you need to have that, especially when you're working on moonshot-based ideas, because that is what gets you through the really hard times, through the setbacks, and you really need to care about what you're doing, and I think you really need to care about doing things outside of just yourself as an individual. So someone with a purpose greater than themselves is something that I think is so important to have on the team.
That's good. I really like that because it makes everyone have skin in the game, essentially, you know. So I actually want to skip around a little bit.
Okay.
You're in two very male-dominated industries. Do you think about that? Did you think about that when you started? Has it affected your career any, or how you think about your next steps?
Ooh. So at first, I didn't think about it too much. I think it started coming into play when I realized, like, when we moved and we progressed and we had success in our field, I noticed that, you know, there weren't women in the room, there weren't, you know, as much of a diverse teams around. Our team was relatively diverse, but it just, as we raised through the ranks in our own realm, diversity decreased.
Yeah.
And that's something that you know, shocked me a little bit.
What does diversity look like to you, though? You
So,
said before that these teams that build these systems should be representative of the people who use them.
yes, definitely.
So what does diversity look like to you? What do you take into account?
So I think diversity is just the world around us, even so many people in this room, and no matter what race you are, no matter what socioeconomic class you are, what gender you identify with, I think whether you're able-bodied or not. So, you know, if you have one demographic, which I don't have to name, building a transportation system that the masses are supposed to use, then are other people going to be thought of when these systems are designed? And it's incredibly important that we have all elements of people in our society today in the decision room for you know, pioneer and frontier technology. It's important. It's just part of my own driver as well.
So it's a huge undertaking,
Yes.
and this has never been done before to this magnitude. So failure has to be something that you think about. But it's kind of like you created the prototype. So how do you think about that? What does failure look like to you when you've created the prototype? Is that a question you can answer very quickly? That would be great.
Yes. I think failure, I mean, you know, there's all of those sayings which are true and cliche at the same time. Edison, 700 times I failed building a light bulb. But I think that, you know, failure is different for people who aren't represented, because we don't really have the image of us doing it until it's done, until maybe some of us are the first to do that. But I do believe that failure is just learning, and you have to continue going because you just gain so much in that process.
So is it really failure if you stop?
No.
Right. Okay, last question.
I got ahead of myself. I don't know.
You all right?
Yes.
Okay. Super last question. If I were about to pioneer something just like you and I was nervous, what would you tell me to motivate me? What would you tell yourself? What is your Hyperloop?
So to motivate you to just do it, like go out, especially if it's something that is very challenging that people might not necessarily adopt easily, because you just grow so much in the process. And when you think really big, and it forces you to have to. So you have to just change your mindset.
Change your mindset?
You have to just completely change your mindset, and you have to just dive in onto the unknown and expect to create like unimaginable results.
Thank you so much. Deborah Navarro, everybody.